Arya didn't know why they were here. Well, she knew what they were here to do, find the missing team, but she wasn't sure why they were here after so very long. There wasn't really much hope. The beam of light from the emitter on her rifle was picking out snatches of the symbols carved into the damp rock, dripping with the dark red liquid she wasn't about to get too close to. She had taken point, and the others followed, picking their way carefully through the long, thin tunnel she hoped would open out into something worthwhile. Her arm ached from carrying the rifle. It had been months since the rigger fitted the limb, but you got what you paid for, she supposed. Pausing, she raised a hand to stop the others, sure she'd seen a flash of movement up ahead. Not realizing she was holding her breath, she crept forward. Muffled rustling reached her ears. She flattened herself against the tunnel wall, her breath now short, sharp, quiet. Steadying herself, she quickly aimed her rifle, and its beam lit up a figure standing unnaturally still, decaying face and bloodshot eyes staring right at her. It only had one arm. Hello, and welcome to The Bad Spot, an actual play podcast in which I, Matt Risby, and I alone am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. Did you all enjoy this week's Tale from the Drift? Once again, this was a community submission from the most excellent Jen Duck, and I just want to extend a huge thanks to her for taking the time to write such an evocative piece to open up the show. Submissions are open, so if you want to roll on the Oracle, see what you can come up with, please get in touch via the details that are on the screen now. So, Session 9. Archer and the kid have infiltrated the grid in order to sabotage the power regulation facility. Archer agreed to do so out of desperation more than anything, under the hope, which could turn out to be a false hope, I guess, that this will get him more information on how to find and reach Blake Sutton before the Corvus Breach's best bounty hunters do. If you want to follow along, then why not leave a like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to be notified when the next session drops, and that way you won't miss a thing. So, we entered the central power regulation facility of the grid, and we were instantly confronted by one of the patrolling guards. They asked to see some ID, and all the kid had in response was a sarcastic remark. So, what should we do here? Something tells me that the kid is just going to start swinging. She is impetuous, and she's brash, and she is not afraid to put herself in harm's way like we saw in the canteen, even though I did step in the way of that, which seems foolish now. But she also said that time is a factor. We've got 15 minutes to pull this off. So I think that before Archer can even say anything, the kid just straight up rushes the guard before they can even get their baton loose, and she tries to take them down, and I'm going to have to get involved. I think Archer's going to have to do something. But I don't think entering the fray and having a combat is appropriate here. A long, drawn-out fight isn't worth it. It's not very interesting. We have the numbers, we have the upper hand, and this is just one guard with just a baton to defend themselves. So I don't think that's the most... Entering the fray, I don't think, is the most interesting choice here. So what we're going to do is, because it is still dangerous and technically still a fight, we're going to condense all this combat down into one roll, and we're going to make the battle move. So when you fight in a battle and it happens in a blur, roll plus, I guess we're fighting in close to overpower our foe, so it will be iron, which is not what I ever want to do, if I'm honest. So let's roll plus iron. Okay, that is a weak hit. We achieve our objective, but not without cost, and must pay the price. So, I think the objective was to quickly and quietly subdue this guard. But I think because the kid just kind of went for it, as soon as the guard's fingers kind of touched the handle of their baton, it was just a bit messy. And I think that she jumps on them, and she's got like her arms around their neck, trying to kind of sleeper hold them into unconsciousness. And Archer sees this and tries to help, but there's arms and legs flailing around, a kid's on the guard's back, and kind of got her arms wrapped around their neck, and the guard's desperately trying to kind of buck her off. So Archer tries to reach in, and he's kind of forced back, and then kind of tries again, and then has to duck one of the kids' flailing legs as she's been spun around, and then Archer reaches out and finally gets hold of one of the guard's free arms, and kind of tries to pull the two of them away from the barriers, firstly, just in case they kind of lose their balance and topple down into the shaft of the power core, and he's got this grip of the guard's arm, and whilst they're trying to fight the kid off, Archer kind of uses all his leverage to kind of whip the two of them into the wall behind him. And the guard, I think, takes the impact kind of face first. And the two crunch into the wall, and the guard staggers back. The kid still wrapped around their neck. And they're moving slower, and I think the lights are starting to go out. And the kid is exerting all of her effort, keeping her arms kind of locked under their chin. And, after a moment, the guard collapses to their knees, slumps forward, face down, with the kid still clamped in place on their back. And she looks up at Archer. She's kind of panting from the effort and says, well, that's one down. And I think we're going to pay the price here by enduring a bit of stress, because in this exact moment, as Archer stands looking down at this sorry scene with this brash teenager clamped to the back of a guard that she has just choked out, this is when Archer realises, in this very moment, that there is no plan at all. And they are just winging it, and that makes Archer very nervous. So I think a hit to my spirit is entirely appropriate. So that's down to 3. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and shake this off. I think Archer needs to focus and concentrate, think about the task in hand, try not to panic, figure out the best way to do this. So we're going to try and resist the stress here. It's either plus heart or plus spirit, whichever is higher, and that is currently our spirit. Okay, a weak hit, so nothing doing here. We can trade momentum for it, but I got a feeling we'll need that momentum, so I'm not prepared to trade it for any spirit here, so we will just press on. And Archer accepts they're in over their heads here, and this is going to be another one of those days that he seems to be having a lot of recently. So he kind of crouches down next to the kid, who is still on the guard's back, still wrapped in the sleeper hold, and he says, do you even have a plan here? And the kid says, well, I got us through the door, didn't I? Archie's just a bit exasperated by all this, and I think he's just going to take charge of the situation a little bit. And we know we have to be 5 floors down. That's what we kind of worked out, didn't we, last session? And I think what Archer is going to do here is try and kind of formulate the best kind of plan that he can put together. So he crawls on his belly to the barriers, so he can kind of get a good look down into the complex and try and figure out the safest and quickest route to get down there and get to where they need to be. So we're going to assess the situation here, which will be securing an advantage. We're doing so using expertise, focus, and observation, so we're rolling plus wits. Okay, another weak hit. So mechanically, we can either take +2 momentum or +1 on our next move. I think that Archer watches for a minute or so. He's trying to kind of ascertain if the guards are patrolling along set routes or if they are reasonably static, and I think it's the latter. They're kind of all just lingering in one place, generally standing about, kind of pacing the small area of catwalk rather than walking a set route, which is not what I've been led to believe that guards would do from all the video games I've played. But, it is what it is. So they kind of they have an area to patrol, but there's no kind of rhyme or reason to how they walk around it. But I think something Archer does notice is that 1 floor down from where they are now is an elevator. And I'm going to take +1 on the next move, because I think what we'll say is that Archer figures out that if he and the kid are quick, if they're quiet, they can get to the elevator without being seen. As the guard on the next floor down, the guard who is nearest the elevator doors, he's currently moving slowly away. So Archer goes back over to the unconscious guard and grabs the key card off the belt, and he says to the kid, follow me, stay close, stay quiet. And he sets off, the kid closely behind. So what we're going to do is we're going to face danger here, but we need to decide whether we're doing this quickly or are we doing this stealthily. I think even though they are moving at speed, it is going to be it is a stealth-based move. I think they're going to try and avoid being seen the best they can rather than be quick. So we're going to roll plus shadow, and we have a +1 from the secure advantage. That's a strong hit. We actually didn't roll a single strong hit all last session, so it's nice to see you, old friend. And that gives us some much needed momentum, so that bumps us up to 7. And yeah, let's envision what this looks like. So Archer and the kid are kind of hugging the wall, trying to keep away from the barriers and be less obvious to anyone who might be looking across. They kind of stick to the kind of shadows. And we move quickly down one flight of stairs, trying not to tread too heavily on the stairs because they're kind of metal and don't want to clank and give our position away. But I think it's relatively noisy in here. I think there's this kind of persistent mechanical hum coming from the core below. I don't think it's loud enough to drown everything out, but the quieter we can be, the better. So we're down on the floor below where we started, the floor where the elevator is, where the guard that we spotted is moving away, and it's close. Archer takes out the guard's keycard, and they move to the elevator doors. And he swipes. And after what seems like an eternity, the light goes green and the doors open. But is there anyone in the lift? Shall we spice this up? Shall we try and make this a bit more interesting? What are the odds that there is someone else in the lift? Should we say 50-50? I do and don't like those odds, but we're going to go with it anyway. 50-50. The door slides open. What do Archer and the kid see? Is there anyone in the elevator? No. And they breathe a sigh of relief, step into the empty carriage, the doors sliding shut behind them. The kid leans over to Archer and whispers, "This is going really well." And Archer just kind of scrunches his face up and kind of pinches the bridge of his nose. He can't quite believe how he's got into this mess, and this is how it's going to have to go down. And he pushes the button to their floor, and well, the elevator was empty when they got in, but does anyone else get in? That's a good question. So does anyone else get into the elevator on its journey down to the floor that they're going? Yes. Okay, so they are one floor away from where they need to be, and the elevator jolts to a sudden stop. Archer looks at the kid, whose eyes pop with alarm. The doors slowly part. And who gets on? I think it's going to be two of like the workers in lab coats, not the guards. And I think these workers are kind of locked in a conversation. They don't even really look up at Archer and the kid. I think they're kind of dressed like workers. It's not really something... There's a hierarchy here. I don't think they're going to talk to the kind of oily rags, as it were. The manual labourers. I think they just carry on their conversation and don't really look up at them. And both Archer and the kid have kind of subconsciously kind of backed right into the corners of the elevator. The doors close and the workers kind of keep talking, and the elevator carries on downwards. Archer looks at the kid. Kid looks back at Archer. He's tense. She's tense. And the bell pings to announce their arrival at the floor. And they step out, past the workers, who don't even notice. They carry on the conversation. They don't even acknowledge them as Archer and the kid step out, and the elevator continues on its way down. So we're here. The kid used that little device, didn't they, to locate the console. So I think she gets Archer's attention, and she's got that device tucked in her palm, and she kind of nods in the direction of the console, which is kind of along the catwalk about 20 meters or so away from the elevator. Between them and the console is another guard, and there's also some more of those lab-coated workers kind of stood talking by the console itself, periodically looking down, pushing a button, adjusting a slider, doing sciencey stuff. Down here, it's much hotter than it was where they entered. It's noisier. Maybe there's kind of steam rising up from some cooling units that are working overtime below them in the core. And there's like an access panel on the wall a little way towards the console, and Archer notices it, and he moves quickly over, and he pops the cover, opens the door, and he gets like a spanner or a space wrench out of his tool belt, something like that, and he kind of holds it up to the machinery inside, but he's kind of not doing anything. And the kid moves alongside and says, "What are you doing?" And Archer kind of whispers back, "Try to look like you're fixing something. Try and blend in, or they'll make us." And the kid gets a tool off her belt and does the same, and I think she does it more convincingly. I might add, she is a worker from the other side of the crevasse, after all. So what's our plan here? Firstly, I think having infiltrated this facility and found the console, I think it's time to mark progress on our vow. It's a troublesome vow, as easy as they come. So each time we mark progress, it's 3 boxes. So mark that now. I think actually sabotaging this thing is going to be the easy part. We've got to get out safely, which I think will be the hard part. And the clock, I must remind you, is still ticking. And the kid kind of looks over to remind me of that fact. So I think we need some kind of distraction here, something to draw the workers away from the console. So Archer kind of relays all this to the kid, and she takes out that small device again. There's kind of wires that come out of it, and there's kind of clamps on each end, and she says, "This will trick the grid into thinking the power is still being regulated from here. That will buy the other side as long as it takes to be discovered to reroute the power back across the bridge. And if they do discover it," and the kid kind of reaches into her belt and pulls out another device. And Archer knows what this device is, because it's a bomb. And the kid says, "This is Plan B." And Archer says, "Plan B is to blow the place up." And the kid says, "Well, not the whole place." And Archer is once again scrunching his face up, pinching the bridge of his nose. "How long will you need to rig it?" "1 minute, maybe 2 tops." "Okay." And Archer looks at the access panel that he's opened, that he's kind of pretending to be working behind, and kind of looks at the kind of maze of wires and breakers and switches and lights, and there's all sorts in here. And I think what he's going to try and do is he's going to try and cause a distraction by kind of messing around with some of this stuff. And I think maybe the floor's lighting and maybe some other power functions is running through this panel. So he turns to the kid and says, "Okay, start walking towards the console now." And she does, walking past the guard and approaching the 2 workers. She passes behind them, and then that's when Archer kills the lights. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to roll several actions into one. And I'm going to say that this is face danger, but by creating a distraction using deception or trickery. So it's going to be plus shadow. Okay, let's do this. Another strong hit. Fantastic. Now we're talking. So we could take +1 momentum. That's up to 8. And Archer cuts the power and immediately flicks on like a little kind of miner's torch that's on his collar. And the guard up ahead puts his flashlight on and is like, "Oh, what's the big idea?" And the workers move away from the console towards Archer. And Archer kind of waves to reassure them and says, I'll have it back up and running in a moment. Just hang on." And he can just about see the kid in behind them, kind of crouched down at the console. And the guard and the workers are now kind of moving along the catwalk towards him. And the guard's like, "Come on, man, get it together." And Archer's like, I'm sorry, just give me a second. And I think that's when Archer kind of punches something else, maybe kind of triggers an alarm or something. There's something that's deafeningly loud, kind of instantly drowns out everything, the din of the core and the guard and the workers. They're both screaming at him, and he's kind of comically motioning to them that he can't hear them. And all the while he's kind of looking past them to see the kid, who must be nearly finished. They must be. And then that's when Archer kills the alarm, and the workers and the guards take their hands from over their ears. And the guard's like, "Get these fucking lights back up now." And Archer's like, "Okay, I'm on it. Okay." And they're kind of right with him now, and he turns back to the open access panel, and the kid is stood right there next to him. She's got her hand on the breaker, and she flicks it back on and says, "There we go. Your lights and alarms are working on this floor now. You're welcome." And she takes out this little data pad and kind of taps into it like she's recording something, like this was all a test or something. And the two of them kind of sneer in the direction of the guards and the workers as Archer and the kid walk back towards the elevator, and Archer swipes the card again. And they step inside. And the kid says, "That was tense." Archer says, "Are we good? Did you bypass it?" And the kid nods and smiles. So once again, we can mark progress on the vow here. Sabotage the power regulation facility. So we're up to 6 out of 10. So Archer presses the button to take them all the way back up. Now, does anyone else get on? No. So far, their escape is going well. The elevator takes them all the way back up without stopping, and they emerge on the floor below where they started. The same guard kind of looking bored on the catwalk, and they make it back up the stairs, and they are back where they began. What about the guard that they left unconscious? Are they still there? Should we ask the Oracle? What are the odds? Should we say it's likely? They were pretty out. It's likely that they are still there. So, is the guard where we left them? No. Okay. That could be trouble. And kind of Archer and the kid share a look, which kind of relays that, and they decide it's time that they left, and time they left quickly. So they step into the airlock, and it shuts behind them. They slip on their respirators, and then as the outer doors open into the kind of dusty red evening outside, they leave. The guard who waved them in, who's clearly a plant from what the kid said, sees them leave and starts to follow behind. And Archer is kind of scanning the surroundings to see if anyone's been alerted, but there's nothing. Each mercenary on each door of each building stands the way they did when they came in, and the three of them move quickly, purposefully down the paths between the buildings, and they round a corner, and they can see the train at the platform, and there's some of the workers starting to get on through the doors, a few more getting off, and they see it, they quicken their pace, and moving towards those large gates they entered the complex through. They're nearly there, maybe 15 meters away, so close. And then they hear an alarm sound, and the mercenaries at the gate ahead of them are slowly raising their guns, and they're motioning for them to stop. Archer turns around, looks behind them, and even under the respirator that they're wearing, he can recognize the guard that the kid choked unconscious, and they're flanked by two more mercenaries, both with their guns raised. He turns to the kid, and they share a look. The jig is very much up. And the kid says, "Okay, plan B it is." And she has this kind of little trigger in her palm, and she clicks it. And suddenly the alarm is drowned out instantly by a huge explosion. And then all hell breaks loose. So I think that as we've blown it up now, that definitely counts as sabotaging the facility. So we're going to go ahead and mark progress, which takes up to 9 out of 10 progress. And we're going to try and roll and fulfill that vow now. Okay, that's a weak hit, so it didn't roll so hot there. But we fulfilled the vow, and there is nothing more to be done. And we don't need to swear an iron vow to set things right, so we're not going to mark any progress on our quest track, unfortunately, but hey, small price to pay. So I think that the weak hit means it's just not going to be a clean getaway, and I think there's so many guards around that that's pretty much assured anyway. And that was a massive explosion, like a really big explosion, and it's kind of sent huge plumes of black smoke and flames into the air, and the mercs who had their guns trained on us, they kind of stumble back, and that's when the kid makes her move, and she shoves one of the mercs backwards and grabs their gun and uses the stock of it to smash into the next merc, knocking them to the ground. And our other companion who was posing as the guard, they have a stun baton out quickly, and they bring down the other two mercs in the noise and the chaos, and they maybe stun that other guard that we choked out just for good measure. And there's panic on the platform, and people are scrabbling to get to the train as its doors close, and it pulls away from the carnage and disappears underground a few hundred meters away. So That went south pretty quickly. And we need to get out of here. We need to kind of figure out if there's any other vehicles here. I think there probably is. But kind of what could they be? Like patrol buggies or something? Like, I think, yeah, maybe the mercs use these kind of like sand buggies to kind of do like short range bits and pieces if they go in somewhere that doesn't require being on the train. So let's say there's a little parking bay with 3 or 4 little buggies, like dune buggies, kind of big chunky tires with like no protection on top. They're just a roll cage. And I guess, that's what the mercs use to kind of get around. Before Archer has taken any of this in, the kid and the person posing as the guard are in the driver and passenger seats. And for a second, just this kind of split second, the kid looks back at Archer and their eyes meet and there's a hesitation. And Archer sees it in her eyes. Just that second of processing the information, the situation they're in, that in that second, she has decided not to leave him there. She could have done. She could have hung him out to dry. She could have left him to be a patsy for this whole situation. She could have used him to get what she wanted and left him there. It would have tied things up for her in a nice, tidy bow. Archer is disposable. That hesitation was her conscience kicking in. And in that split second, in that tiny moment, Archer knows that he can trust her, that she is a good person. She's a reckless person, and she likes choking people and blowing things up, but she is a good person. And whatever cause that this is all in aid of, this now must be a just cause, if that's what she's fighting for. And in that moment, he knows he can trust her. And I think that's all it takes for us to forge a connection with someone. And Archer has been on his own for so long. He's just not used to having anyone else in his life to share it with, or having anyone kind of be concerned for him. But this moment is a connection. It's a genuine, sincere connection. And I'm going to try and represent that in game by making the make a connection move. So when I search out a new relationship or give focus to an existing one, roll plus heart. It's a weak hit. So we create a connection and we're going to give them a role and a rank. And until we find out their real name, they're just going down as the kid. And as for their role, I don't know yet because I'm still not 100% sure of who she is or what her motives are. But there is a connection there. Rank-wise, I think maybe it's dangerous. If the conduit was formidable, then dangerous feels right. So from now on, when the kid helps me on a move, I get a mechanical benefit should it be narratively appropriate. But it was also a weak hit, so the connection comes with a complication or a cost. But this is a split-second moment in amongst the kind of chaos. And I've already dragged this out for a few minutes talking about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bank that complication, and I'll come back to it to try and figure out what that demand might be. But for now, I'm going to jump on the back of this buggy and we are going to speed away, and we're driving parallel to the train tracks, kind of kicking up clouds and clouds of red dust behind us. And we're obviously going to get chased, right? We rolled a weak hit on fulfilling the vow, so I pretty much think that guarantees a bit of a pursuit. See, the alarms are still blaring, and we have assaulted several guards and mercenaries, so they have to give chase. So I think that is exactly what would happen. So let's say there's 2 other buggies loaded up with a driver and a gunner in the passenger seat, and they pull out of the complex and they start to speed after us. So what we're going to do here is we are going to have a bit of vehicular combat, and we are going to enter the fray. So let's give this combat a name and a rank. I think we're just going to call this Escape the Pursuing Mercenaries. And whilst we're outnumbered, I think we do have a bit of a head start and a lead. So I think that we're going to give this the rank of Dangerous. So we're going to enter the fray here. And as we're on the move, we are definitely being chased. So we are going to use Edge. Okay, strong hit. That's good. So we're in control of this fight and we take +2 momentum. So we're up to 9, nearly full now. And I say we're a good 100 meters or so ahead of the 2 buggies behind us. And the kid has her foot to the floor. But there is 3 of us kind of crammed onto this 2-person vehicle. And the other buggies are, have the regulation 2 people in them. So we've got a bit more ballast here. And I think that they're closing. And I think they start to kind of fan out a little. And our kind of pretend mercenary in the passenger seat leans out with their rifle and kind of squeezes off a burst of gunfire. And do I have my gun on me? Do I have my gun on me under these overalls? I think Archer would be a fool to leave without it, so I'm going to say yes. His pistol doesn't have kind of much stopping power. He's not going to blow up a car with it. But it does have better than average range. We've established that. And he's a half-decent shot, so he's not completely useless here. And also, I think I've just realised that there are some special rules for vehicle combat. I'm just going to look those up quickly. Okay, so there isn't particular vehicle combat rules, but there is rules for damage to a vehicle. So what we're going to do is, this buggy is going to be classed as an incidental vehicle, and it has a health value to represent kind of how much damage it can take, basically. And that is in the form of something called integrity. And this buggy is a light vehicle, which is the kind of smallest type, and it has an integrity of 3, which, if we take damage, that will be important. So our other saboteur, the person posing as a mercenary, is firing out of the passenger side, and I'm going to kind of help us kind of focus fire on the buggy that's nearest, so the one that's trying to pull up beside us. So it's going to be the move strike, because we are in combat and we are in control and we are fighting at a distance, so it'll be rolling plus edge. Okay, that's a weak hit, so we get to mark progress twice. But we expose ourselves to danger and we are in a bad spot. So I think our focus fire is effective. I think both of our shots kind of slam into the hood of this buggy and kind of causes jets of smoke to start streaming out of the side. And the merc, who was maybe the gunner in that other buggy, who was trying to get into a position to take a clear shot at us, has kind of got to duck back inside the vehicle as it kind of veers away and veers off course. And it's not out of the fight, but we've slowed it down. But we've exposed ourselves to danger because the other buggy has caught up with us and it is coming in on our blind side, on the right-hand side of us, and both mercs in that buggy have their guns out, ready to unload. We're in a bad spot, so we're going to react under fire, and I think I spot them first, and I kind of shout something to the kid who kind of clocks them and then has to take evasive action. So she's going to react under fire, but we're going to do the move. What would the kid do in this situation? I think she would definitely swerve into them and try and kind of ram them. Right, that is totally what she would do. So she kind of screams, "Hold on!" and she jerks the steering wheel to one side, and Archer loses his balance, but manages to hang on to the roll cage as his life flashes before his eyes when he realizes what the kid is trying to do. They're not getting further away from this buggy; they're going towards it, and I think this is going to be react under fire, but by blocking or diverting with force. So this is going to be plus iron. But I think what I'll do is I'll take the +1 assist from my connection that I now have with the kid. And I'll also be able to take +1 momentum on a hit. So I guess we're doing this. Weak hit. So yes, momentum goes up to max at 10. So we succeed, but at a cost. So our buggy smashes into theirs and it kind of forces them to take evasive action. They kind of stop aiming and have to start hanging on for dear life as the wheels of each buggy grind up against each other. The bumper bars, the grill at the front, I don't know what it's called, the bumper? We'll call it the bumper. The kind of bumpers are kind of tangled together, and Archer's like practically in the other buggy now. We are, I could actually reach out and punch the driver, which could be relevant, I guess. But first we're going to have to make that suffer move, and I think it makes sense for the buggy's integrity to take a hit. It was quite a collision. So yeah, we're going to mark that down to 2. So yeah, a couple more hits and we won't be moving anymore, on wheels that is. And we're still in a bad spot. We don't have control in this fight. So, to represent that, shall we say that the momentum of this impact has forced us towards the edge of the crevasse? And that if we stay on this course, we're going to plummet to our deaths into a radioactive ravine. Let's say that, why not? What's the worst that could happen? So, these 2 buggies are locked together, and I think the driver in the other buggy is kind of fumbling for their gun, and the passenger is kind of moving up into a standing position, kind of coming out of the top of the roll cage to get a clear shot into our buggy. So we're not in control here, but Archer is gonna fight back. So this is gonna be the move Clash, and this is in close, so it's gonna be plus iron. That's a strong hit. So we overwhelm our foe and take back control and mark progress twice. So we're up to 8 progress on this pursuit. And Archer, what's he doing? He's clinging to the roll cage for dear life. He has one foot on the door of the other buggy, and he's trying to kind of kick it free. And then he kind of sees the driver kind of gathering themselves and going for their gun, and then he starts to kick at the driver. And I think the first kick jars the driver's hand against the door, and they drop their pistol. But then the other merc is now in position, and they're kind of aiming their rifle in at the buggy and at the kid. So Archer kicks again, planting his boot into the driver's face, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And on the 3rd time, the driver slumps forward, knocked out, and drags the wheel to one side, turning the buggy towards the crevasse. One more kick from Archer, and the buggies separate. The mercenary with the rifle tries to gain control of the buggy, tries to reach down, but before they can get to the wheel, it jumps and disappears over the edge, and it's gone. So we're back in control after the strong hit, but we still have another buggy on our tail, and it's kind of beaten up, but it's still there. And I think shots from that one are kind of fizzing through the air past us, and I think because we were tangled up with the other one, it's managed to catch us up somewhat. But it's still kind of belching smoke out from under the hood. And I think as we're in control, I think we'll just try and finish this fight and make the take decisive action move. We're at 8 progress, so let's roll against that progress and see how we're going to finish this. Okay, weak hit. So we achieve the objective, but not without cost. So I think the kid steers us back away from the edge, and Archer and our gunner get into decent positions to open up on the other buggy. And I think there's an exchange. We trade fire with the other mercs, and I think we're able to kind of aim a bit better and line up some good shots. And we managed to kind of spray the other buggy and kind of pepper it with enough shots to kind of maybe blow out a tire and kind of cause the engine to kind of blow, and then it kind of judders and then flips and rolls and rolls and rolls, and it kind of flings the passengers out, and the buggy then comes to a grinding halt in the red sand as we speed away to safety. But what did it cost us? I mean, look at the options on the take decisive action move. The one that jumps out at me is others pay the price, someone else suffers the cost. And I think that in the passenger seat, our gunner, the person who was posing as a guard, posing as a mercenary, is kind of slumped over. And in that exchange of gunfire, they've taken a pretty nasty hit. And the kid sees this and she floors it. She puts her pedal to the metal. And we're not far from plant number 4 now, the nearest of the processing plants on this side of the crevasse. And in the distance behind, the smoke still rises up from the grid. That explosion was pretty big. It was massive. And that's when Archer realizes that it was the kid's plan all along to destroy the whole facility rather than just bypass it. There's no way that amount of explosives was meant to just disrupt operations. It was there to destroy. She always meant to kind of blow it to hell. And Archer reaches into the passenger seat to kind of put some pressure on the wound in our kind of gunner's stomach, but it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And then we need to get to safety and get treatment real quick. So we arrive at Plant 4, and it is this dense industrial complex. Dense with people and also with machinery. There's these vast foundries and forge towers kind of rising above us as the buggy rolls down these narrow alleyways between the buildings and the machinery. There's this thick industrial smog that kind of dirties everything, makes it kind of hard to see what's what. the people who live and work here kind of trudge dejectedly past us. They initially see the buggy and kind of suspect that like maybe there's a raid or something. But then they kind of reassess the situation when they see that the passengers are in workers' gear and kind of move aside. And the kid is motioning for the people to get out of the way. And we find a quiet alleyway to ditch the ride. And from here, the kid leads us on foot. Archer is holding up the injured gunner. And they're in bad shape. I think Archer can feel their weight growing heavier and heavier with each step as they start to fade. And the kid is leading us through this kind of labyrinth of alleyways and cut-throughs and shortcuts. And Archer's like completely turned around. He has no idea where he is. If he loses the kid, he won't be able to find his way back out of here. It's like a rabbit warren. And then the kid leads them to this kind of set of kind of big iron doors on the floor. You know, kind of like a coal chute or kind of like a beer cellar pair of doors. And she stamps on it with her foot, kind of bangs a couple of times and steps back and waits. And after a moment, the doors open out and she starts in down some steps and motions to Archer to follow. As the doors close behind us, we find ourselves in a dark room. It's a small room with very little inside by way of furnishing or markings or any distinguishable features at all. There's just one person inside. One person, the person who opened the door, and they're in heavy breathing apparatus, full protective gear. Can't really work out any details or descriptors about them. On the wall opposite where we entered, there are two small circular openings, each probably, I don't know, a meter in diameter tops. They are small. And the kid is talking to the person who let us in, talking to the person in the protective gear. And they kind of nod in agreement with what the kid's saying, and the kid is kind of motioning to Archer and pointing at the injured gunner, and they kind of have a to and fro, and then Archer can't hear what's being said, but after a minute, the person stands and kind of reaches up to the wall and pushes this big chunky orange button down. And then after a moment, there's this kind of metallic grinding and these flat kind of board-like things appear at the edge of each circular opening, coming from inside it. And the kid says, "We've got to get across, and quickly." So these are basically smugglers' tubes that are built into the bridges that span the crevasse. No one can pass that crevasse, remember the Chernobyl helicopter. But this is how people have been smuggling goods and people, across either side, illicitly. And this is how we're going to cross. We load the injured gunner up onto one of these kind of boards, and the kid climbs on with them in their tube. And she motions to Archer to climb into the other opening, and he does, and he realizes that the board that appeared is like a kind of sled type device. It's kind of like guided into these grooves, and the sled is about as long as he is. And behind him, the opening kind of closes a bit like what's it called, like an iris on a camera, kind of James Bond style. And he's plunged into darkness. The metallic grinding starts up again, and he kind of clings on, and he feels himself being pulled feet first through this tube. First slowly, then a bit quicker, and the speed builds until the point that he's really kind of gripping on with his knuckles. And it's hot in there. It's really, really hot. And he's clinging on and traveling at speed for maybe kind of 2, 3, 4 minutes, and then it starts to slow. And another iris opens ahead of him at his feet. Light kind of floods into the tunnel. He squints. He's across. He takes a moment to steady himself and kind of get his bearings before he kind of climbs out of the opening at the other end. And there's a room on the other side that's much like the room on the side they just came from. But unlike that one, this is full of people. They're all crammed into this room. gathered around the other opening mainly, crowded around the injured gunner. As Archer emerges, he suddenly realizes there are guns in his face, people pointing all manner of weapons at him. Everyone's in the same kind of heavy environmental gear and breathing apparatus, and it's very difficult to tell people apart or get any information about them. But then the kid stands between him and the guns and kind of lowers them with her hand. And the crowd goes back to trying to help the injured gunner and kind of lifts them up the stairs and out. And we follow, and we're once again in a kind of a dense industrial complex. But this one is a bit different. There's no smog. And interestingly, there's no people. There are no crowds lining the street, no workers kind of trudging dejectedly. There's just no one. No one to be seen. It's like a ghost town. And there's like a vehicle waiting for us, a bit like, like one of those baggage haulers at the airport. And the injured gunner is loaded onto to kind of one of the little sleds and to one of the little carriages, and then Archer and the kid get on another. And the kid says, "We made it. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." And the hauler starts to move between the alleyways, and the building density is very similar, but there is just no one here. And we're kind of weaving in and out of these buildings, this weird kind of ghost town. And after a few minutes, we reach a building. And the injured gunner is taken off inside, and we're commanded by some of the others to wait. It's eerily quiet. The spires of piping and chimneys tower above us. And the building we're waiting outside is made of like solid concrete with these heavy metallic doors. It's somewhat reminiscent, I would say, of the buildings in the grid. It's kind of like squat, grey, functional, chunky buildings. No windows, no features, just a big slab of reddish grey concrete. This one's much smaller, I guess, but a kind of similar style of architecture. And we sat outside for about kind of 10 minutes or so. A couple of armed guards, the people who are waving the guns in Archer's face, stay behind to kind of keep us here. And then the kid is summoned to the door after it slides open. And she has a quick talk with someone. I can't hear what they're saying, but I can see them talking. She motions to Archer for him to join her. And he does. Steps through this door into the airlock. Door slides closed behind them. And there's this hiss of decompression. And they take off their masks. And it's this huge relief to be breathing air once again. And the kid looks up at Archer. And her eyes are reddened with tears. And she looks worried. She looks anxious. And then the door on the other side of the airlock hisses open. And the two of them enter a large room. At the centre of this room is this long kind of conference table. Like this is a meeting room. And hanging on the inside, on the walls, are long, colourful banners that almost stretch the distance from floor to ceiling. They're multicoloured. They bear lots of dates and names that Archer doesn't recognise. They're stitched into the fabric. Along each side of the table are rows of empty chairs, maybe kind of 20 or 25 empty chairs, and at the table's end stands a man. He's old. He has dark, kind of mahogany skin. He's bald, has this kind of greyish white beard. And Archer and the kid move closer. But the man doesn't look up at them, doesn't acknowledge them. He's focused on something else. He is focused on the boy who is lying motionless on the table in front of him. And the boy, without his mask, looks a lot like him, only much younger. He's dressed as a mercenary, and he has this bloody wound in his side. And the man does not look up at them as they approach. But as they near, he says, "Which one of you would care to explain why my son is dead?" Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please do remember to like this video, subscribe if you've not done so already, and click the bell so you'll be the first to know when the next video is out. Until next time, farewell and safe passage.